tomorrow. We'll have it recorded. Okay. We're going to a very interesting place. We're going to a new chapter of Tanya. So to understand this new chapter of Tanya, we need to recap where we're holding, what we're talking about in the previous chapter of Tanya. Last chapter of Tanya, chapter 37, said that we all have a mission in life. Our mission is to bring Mashiach. How do we do that? By changing the physical world. And we explained that we do that when we eat. We change the energy of the food to become used for holiness. We change our body. We change the thing turns into mitzvahs. And when we give tzedakah, all our hard effort put into earning the money and all the things we could have used the money for, all of that is being elevated and being brought to Hashem. And through that, we're bringing about Mashiach. We're bringing about Mashiach and so on. And we're changing the world for good. So really leads us to an interesting question that might take place. We're basically saying that we're very mission-oriented, that we have a goal and we have a mission. And we even said, and we're going to say it in today's Tanya, that the mission outweighs almost everything. Like the bottom line is, did you help the person or did you not? I don't care what intentions you had. Did you do what you're supposed to do or did you not do what you're supposed to do? And we said, even to argue that point, we said that your godly soul has no real benefit from coming into this world, because no matter how high it will grow, it's not about it. It's about what is it accomplishing. Leads us to a very interesting question. So does it even matter? Do we even care about the background, your reasoning, your intent? Like in not really compare this topic, but to show you how in law, I think we have this idea, what was your intent, right? Somebody killed another person. I don't know, they say like intent is 9/10 of the law. So intention does make a big difference. So the question we have today that we're addressing is, in the chapter 38 of Tanya, if it's all about just the fact, changing the physical world, does it make a difference what my intent is? And I'll give you two examples of where this comes into play in actual day life. Someone asked me a question. They were learning Hebrew with me, how to read Hebrew. And they said, Rabbi, now that I'm learning how to read Hebrew, how should I daven? Should I daven more in English and understand what I'm saying? Or should I daven in Hebrew and I'm actually doing the words in the mitzvah correctly? How important is the intent, the kavanah behind the mitzvah? And another example, one of my kids, I said, did you make a bracha? I saw he didn't make a bracha. I said, you make a bracha? He says, yeah, in my head. Just this morning, I think it happened. I said, no, you can't make a bracha in your head. You have to make a bracha with your mouth. So the question is, if the physical world is the goal, and that's the mission, and that's what we're saying is, and we're going to start off today's Tanya like that, how important is the significance of the reasons for the things that I'm doing? And we're going to say it's very significant. It makes a major difference. So join me today as we go on this journey of chapter 38, discussing the idea of the reason behind what we do. And by the way, there could be many reasons for why someone does something. But what would be a good reason, a Torah reason, a spiritual reason for why we're doing mitzvahs? One of the greatest reasons is because you're connecting to Hashem through that. So I'm davening because I'm connecting to Hashem. I'm learning Torah because I'm connecting to Hashem. I'm becoming one with God. So does that reason make a difference in my actions of what I'm doing? A very interesting question. Let's see inside. Behold, from everything that we studied in chapter 38, that we're so mission-oriented, it's all about bringing Mashiach. Yuvan Hativ, we will understand some facts in life. That it says that thinking is not like speaking. You need to speak. If you sat and meditated in your mind on the words of Shema, you read it not physically with your lips, you read it in your mind, your mind's eye, in your heart, levad alone, and you did it with complete exertion. You meditated and you thought and you contemplated for hours. It's almost like, and this could be a mistake with people that are yoga or these things are maybe good, but the problem is if you're just into the emotional part of it, being Jewish at heart and not the physical mitzvah. So a guy could sit and meditate on the Shema for 2 hours. He uses every part of his energy, but does not bring the Shema or the davening down physically. You did not fulfill your obligation. You didn't fulfill your obligation. I don't care that you sort of meditate on Shema for 2 hours. For the greatest thing. And you need to go back and read Shema again. The same thing is with grace after meals when you want to say Birkat Hamazon after you eat bread. It's a biblical mitzvah. Torah says when you eat food, you have to thank Hashem. So the guy sat for 2 hours, meditated on how much he appreciates Hashem, and the law is you didn't fulfill your obligation. We can understand why based on chapter 37, which we learned this past week, because the goal is a mission-oriented goal to change the world. Very nice. You had all these great meditations, but you didn't fulfill your mission. You didn't change the world. That's the purpose you're created for and born into this world for. The same thing goes with all rabbinic blessings, that before you eat something, you have to make a blessing, which is exactly what happened in my kitchen this morning with one of my kids. Or when you're praying and you're davening, you can sit for 3 hours in shul, sit a whole Yom Kippur, but you didn't say a word. It doesn't count. You have to physically say the words. You have to do the mitzvah. It has to be brought down into our physical world because we are created for a purpose. We are created for a mission. And our mission is here in this physical world. And if you do not physically do the mitzvah in the world, it's as if you didn't do it and you must start over again. Now, what happens if they do the opposite? They said the words of davening, but they did not have intent, at least not proper intent. After the fact, which means you fulfilled your obligation. You shouldn't do that, but if you did that, you fulfilled your obligation, and you do not need to repeat the davening again. Wow, because you fulfilled your mission. Levad, besides, he says, there's an exception to the rule. This is what I told the person who asked me this question just on Shabbos. There's only 2 parts of davening which you must have contemplation and meditate on, think about what you're saying, and that is the first verse of the Shema prayer, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Echad, and also the first blessing of the Amidah, that God is our forefather, the king of our forefathers, God of our forefathers, and their merit He protects us, and then the rest of the davening. If you just said words, and you came to shul and you were kind of tired and you didn't think really what you were saying, you have fulfilled your obligation. Why? Because the main thing of you shouldn't do it, and it's not good. It looks horrible. Imagine talking to Hashem without really having intention of what you're saying. But you fulfilled your obligation because our whole class on 37 was that we are mission-driven, oriented people who need to fulfill our mission, and that's what you did. You fulfilled your mission. I'll give you an example. Maybe if people are having a hard time understanding this, I'll give you an example. Someone comes to you and says, Mister, I want you to give charity to this guy who's hungry. He needs a sandwich to eat. And you really don't want to give him a sandwich. You think that he doesn't deserve it. He should, whatever kind of things are in your head that you think you shouldn't give it to him. You gave it to him. And he ate a sandwich. It doesn't matter what your intent was. The bottom line is the guy's not hungry anymore. So we have a life, and you might be not the nicest person because you didn't have the good intention, or you might be a nice person, whatever it is. The fact is, in life, we live in a physical world where the bottom line is what your intent is or what your intent is not. We live in an action world. And the fact is, did you do it or did you not do it? Right? All excuses in the world, yes or no. So mission-oriented world. So based on this, we can understand that if I sit and be Jewish, as people say in my heart, I'm Jewish in my heart, but I'm not physically Jewish. We live in a physical world. You don't want someone to pay you emotionally, for the work that you're doing. Okay, I'm going to pay you mentally and pay you emotionally. No, we live in a physical world. You have to act in a physical way. And that's why if you sit and meditate for 3 hours, you haven't done your mission, you need to daven again. Vice versa, if you daven with all the words and you did it in a not good way, you fulfilled the obligation, you fulfilled your mission, you don't have to daven again besides those 2 parts of Shabbat. These are Bereish Perek Beis Brachas, Ad Kan Mitzvahs Kavanah, Mekan Be'elch Mitzvahs Kriya, like it says in Jewish law and it says in the Talmud, that intent is key for those 2 parts of davening, but otherwise you fulfill the obligation by doing the physical mitzvah. The reason is, why is that? The soul doesn't need to be fixed by mitzvahs. The soul doesn't need the Shema, doesn't need the prayer, the blessings. The soul doesn't need it. So if you're just going to meditate on a soul level, it's not necessary. It doesn't need that mitzvah to accomplish what it needs to get to. What is needed, like the purpose and your mission is because you need to fix your body and this world. And your vital soul, your animal soul, needs to be fixed by your godly soul. So if you haven't done the mitzvah with your vital animal soul, then you have not fulfilled the purpose of why you need to even do the mitzvah. Your physical body needs to put on tefillin. That's its mission. That's where the godly soul came into your vital animal soul in order to give it the ability to put on tefillin. Your godly soul can meditate from today to tomorrow about tefillin, but it doesn't need it. It didn't come down in the world for it. Therefore, it's not really gaining much by as much or necessary. You might have meditated on great things, but it came here to get the body to put on tefillin to actually do the mitzvah physically. That when he speaks the words of davening, you move your lips through the 5 different ways a person could use their mouth and their throat, the way that they speak. It's by moving it and doing it in a physical act, you're getting your body involved and you're elevating your vital animal body. But the same thing is with all the other physical mitzvahs that your body does. That is the reason why your body came in here. That's the purpose of the mitzvah. It is to do a physical accomplishment of a mitzvah. And that's based on chapter 37. That's the outcome of what we learned in the previous week's Tanya in chapter 37, that everything is about physical. Well, then we come to the place of, well, if that's true and that's the purpose of creation, is a physical mitzvah, who even needs meditation? How does kavana, intention, and feeling a connection behind it, do we even need that? And that's where the Tanya now goes, that we've made that kind of argument that we just spoke about, an outcome of 37. What about the other parts? What about the intent? Nevertheless, even though the key element, the most important part, is the physical mitzvah, Amru, still they also say tefillah or shabracha b'lei kavana. If you daven or you make a blessing, a bracha, you pray, you say a blessing without kavana, without intent, without meaning behind it, it's kiguf b'lei neshama. It's like a body without a soul, like a dead body. The body's there and exists, but you're missing the soul. You know what a difference it makes is when you have proper intent and reasoning behind what you're doing. You know how much more beautiful your mitzvah looks. I mean, we know about this, like when you tell your kid to clean his room and he's like, oh, I have to do it, versus I'm happy to help in the house. It's a whole different experience. There are both cases he's helping. Or imagine with the spouse. The spouse wants a spouse to do something, and they're either really not interested in doing what they were asked, or they're very interested in doing what they're asked. It makes a huge, even though they're both doing it or not doing it, it makes the biggest difference to the marriage. It makes the biggest difference to the relationship between the parents and the children, because kavana is basically a very good analogy. It's like you're right, the body's here, but you're missing the whole neshama, you're missing the whole soul. Perish, meaning, so he's going to explain this idea for today and tomorrow, and the next day we're going to be discussing the beauty and the necessity and what it means. Why is it that kavana adds so much to your mitzvah? Just like all creations in this world, all physical creations have a body and a soul. Anything that exists has the body, which is what you see, and the soul, that's the backing behind it. Which means any living thing, everything has a nefesh, the soul of every living thing, veruach, and a spirit of any flesh, nishmas, and a shama, sheruach haim ba'apav, that has a soul, mikol ba'alei chayim, from all creations, not just human beings. Does Hashem give a soul to people? Even animals has a soul that brings them into existence, a life that they're living. Hashem chayis kulam, and Hashem makes everything exist. So there's a spiritual energy. We're going to learn in tomorrow's class, very interesting, that even rocks, which seem to be dead, that have no life, at least compared to vegetation, which grows, or animals, which walks, and people, which are of course, people could think and speak, have emotions. Even rocks, we're going to say later on in this chapter, they're still created from God. They come from a spiritual world, which is their soul. The bottom line is anything in creation, and we're going to get into more detail this later on, is brought into existence, which means we all see the physical body that exists, but everything had to be brought down from the spiritual worlds to bring it into existence, which is the soul behind it. I don't know, like a computer screen. It's the zeros and the ones, whatever, behind what you're watching on the screen. It has the background to it, the behind, the soul of it. Even the physical body, even inanimate objects, like he's going to explain, our world is divided into 4 categories. Our universe, our world is divided, all creations are divided into 4 categories. You have inanimate objects, which is like, I guess, minerals, like rocks or salt, which you really don't see any life in it. Very little life is seen in it. Then you have vegetation, which has definitely more life than dirt, because you see it grows and expands. You see trees are growing beautiful now outside with the spring, they're budding. Then on top of that, you have animals which could walk, have relationships, whatever, whatever they do with animals and human beings, which have intellect. I mean, and there are 4 levels, one after another. Even the lowest level, inanimate objects, the fact is, it has life and energy from God, bringing it into creation. Because if God wouldn't, then it would simply disappear. If God wouldn't make it every single second exist, we're going to discuss in the 2nd book of Tanya, we're going to start that in a few weeks, is that everything exists only because of the background that's bringing it into existence, the life force that's bringing it into existence. So, okay, fine. So you see it looks like a dead rock, but it's not dead at all, because otherwise it wouldn't exist. It has to have a spiritual element, a soul behind it, that is its energy that's bringing it into existence. So it's living. Nevertheless, even though we're saying that a soul is the backing to even inanimate objects, you still can't compare the energy, the soul that brings the physical body into existence, relative to this soul itself, which we're not talking about the soul that brings the body into existence. We're talking about the soul that we put into the body. The soul itself, obviously, clearly in that neshama, that soul is very godly. It's revealed that it's godliness, which is what's bringing the bodies and making the bodies move. So you have a body which could be a dead body. The fact that the dead body exists is because it has its soul behind it, back into it, the energy that brings it into existence. But then we have the actual soul, which Hashem puts into the body. That soul actually makes the body move around, and all of a sudden the body's a living body. So just like you can't compare the physical body creation to the soul experience, that it's spiritual, it's alive, it's kicking, it's moving, it's living, even though it's so too, you also can't compare, right? You also can't compare the difference when you daven without kavana, without intention, although you have the body there and in its existence, totally not compare the energy, the godliness, the presence of Hashem is when you have meditating, you clearly have Hashem in mind. And this is just the beginning of idea. Tomorrow we're going to discuss in detail the difference between these two. And that's the beginning of chapter 38 in Tanya. Any questions or comments?